Chapter 1. The Assessment. The silence was the worst part. Not the silence of a tomb, but the deep, bone-hollow quiet of a place where emotion was surgically removed. Aliena, known only as the 50 Silver, stood before the master, waiting for the verdict. Her face was hidden behind a smooth, featureless ceramic mask, a second skin, colder and harder than her own. She could still feel the phantom warmth of the target's blood on her gloves, which meant the work had been messy. Messy was a mistake. The air in the master's chamber was thin, smelling of soot and old leather. Truth be told, she didn't know what scared her more, the pain of failure or the terrifying, empty satisfaction of success. Her heart beat with the slow, steady rhythm of a metronome, a pulse she had spent 10 years training to control. The master, a man whose face was a patchwork of scar tissue and apathy, leaned forward, his one good eye, the color of chipped ice, fixing on her. He didn't speak, he didn't need to. His silence was a tangible weight, pressing down on her lungs. Because of that, Aliena began to speak. Her voice, filtered through the ceramic mask, was a low, toneless rasp. The target was secured and neutralized. The documents were retrieved and copied before the breach was reported. The extraction was clean. She rattled off the details like inventory, focusing on the precision, not the life she had extinguished. Not only that, but she included the minimal collateral damage report, anticipating his questions. The master simply nodded, a slow, minimal movement. He was calculating the cost, she thought, always the cost. His gaze raked over her, a physical inspection. He saw the almost imperceptible tear in the leather of her gauntlet, right above the wrist. The gauntlet. The master finally spoke, his voice dry as dust. Damage reports, 50 silver. A minor scrape. A necessary pivot because the floorboards were compromised, she stated, making sure her voice held zero apology. Apology is a weakness. Still, a small, internal voice, the ghost of the girl named Lyra, winced. The master rose slowly, his shadow stretching across the cold stone floor, enveloping her. He reached out not to strike but to examine the wound. His fingers, heavy and calloused, brushed her cheek, then the mask. She forced herself not to flinch. In that moment, the only way to survive was to become nothing, a cipher, a silent weapon. She knew her worth was only found in her ruthlessness, and love/kinship was a weakness that leads to betrayal. That's why she was here. Without another word, the master retrieved a small pouch from his belt. He didn't hand it to her. He didn't have to. He silently dropped a newly forged, engraved silver coin onto the cold stone floor at her feet. It clinked once, echoing in the vast chamber. 50 silver. Her payment. The coin's ring held a subhook. Why the fixed price, and what does the engraving mean? Chapter 2. The Cage. Aliena didn't bother to retrieve the coin until the heavy, iron door to her small, stone cell slammed shut. Just like that, she was isolated again. Her cell was small, a perfect cube designed for efficiency, with a pallet of straw and a small bucket for washing. She went straight to her workbench, ignoring the coin for now. She meticulously cleaned her weapons. Each knife, each dart, each hidden lockpick was examined, oiled, and polished. This was her meditation, her way to keep the chaos of the world out. Meanwhile, she recounted the mission details backward, forward, and in chronological order. She had to, because if her mind wandered, the memories would sneak in. The master said emotion was a sickness. She carefully unwrapped the handle of one of her primary daggers. Tucked tightly beneath the leather grip was a small, tarnished, smooth pebble, gray and utterly unremarkable, save for the faint, shimmering flecks of gold running through its surface. A pebble from the Sunstone Palace gardens, from the fountain where she, Lyra, used to sit. The soft, gentle curve of the stone felt like a lie against her calloused palm. Deep down, she knew the truth. This pebble was her single greatest liability. She ran her thumb across the smooth surface once, a ghost touch to a ghost's life, before snapping the leather back over the grip, sealing the memory away. She had survived because she had become the 50 silver. She wouldn't fail because of Lyra. But then, a rhythmic, heavy knock, 3 slow, deliberate strikes, echoed through the iron door, shaking the very air in the small room. The master never knocked. Never. Chapter 3: The Summoning. Aliana secured her weapons and mask, retrieving the freshly engraved silver coin before she left her cell. She was brought immediately back to the master's office. As the silence stretched between them, she noted the change. The usual air of cold routine was replaced by an almost palpable tension. The master was standing before a large wooden table. He wasn't studying damage reports. He was staring at a detailed, painted map. It wasn't the schematic of a fortress or a remote outpost. It was the vibrant, elaborate depiction of a lavish, sun-drenched city, a magnificent metropolis of white stone and gilded towers. It was Etheria, the capital of the Sunstone Kingdom. The next contract, the master stated, gesturing to the map with a scarred finger. The biggest score in a decade. A payout large enough to fund our entire operation for 5 years. The scale of the mission alone created high-stakes conflict. Aliana felt a dizzying pressure, like a diver sinking too fast.
She studied the map.
The streets were too familiar. The towering central palace, like a giant sundial, made her breath catch, a reflex she immediately punished herself for. No matter how hard she tried to keep her mind attached, her adaptive royal intelligence was already cataloging the weaknesses in the palace's south wall, passages she knew from games of hide-and-seek. Infiltration of the Sunstone capital, she noted, her voice steady. During the succession crisis. Precisely, the master confirmed. In fact, this mission was so sensitive that they couldn't risk the normal channels. He pointed to the gilded palace, its beauty like a shimmering knife blade hidden in a bouquet of lilies. Your old skills, Lyra, the ones we beat out of you, they are now required. The use of her forgotten name, Lyra, was the unexpected twist. It wasn't a slip, it was a deliberate show of power, reminding her he knew everything. Which meant he was leveraging her trauma, forcing the wound open. Did she know what scared her more, the contract or the fact that he named her? He pushed a thick, sealed document across the table. The target's identity is contained within this seal. You will not break it until you are 2 days from the capital. You leave at dawn. Before she could move, the master laid a hand on the scroll. His voice dropped, heavy with finality. Failure here means the end of our unit. But for you, failure means a return to the training blocks.
Permanently.
The blood oath demands absolute obedience. He released the document. Aliana picked up the scroll. It felt impossibly light, yet its weight was the entire destiny of her lost kingdom. The master's direct mention of her childhood name, coupled with the location, ensures Aliana is psychologically prepared for the internal war to come. This is the hint of disruption that sets the entire narrative in motion. She is now carrying the name of her lost self into the heart of her betrayal. Chapter 4: The Scroll and the Flame. Aliana didn't wait for dawn. The tension from the master's use of the name Lyra was a live wire sparking in her gut. She was scheduled to depart, but first, she needed to know the parameters of the sacrifice she was about to make. She was supposed to wait 2 days to break the seal, but discipline was the key to survival, and knowledge was the key to flawless execution. She wasn't just following orders anymore, she was calculating risk. Instead of packing, she carried the heavy, sealed mission document to her workbench. The seal was elaborate, stamped with the Iron Keep's insignia. Breaking it now was technically treason, punishable by the very training she dreaded. But failure in the field was worse. That's why she carefully applied a small tool to the wax, a trick she'd learned from a disgraced court thief, melting the edges just enough to lift the scroll without cracking the insignia. The master had demanded obedience, but he had rewarded ingenuity. She unrolled the thick parchment. The fine script detailed the political situation in Etheria, the succession crisis, the loyalist factions, and the intense scrutiny surrounding the coronation. As the truth unraveled, she found not one name, but 2 critical pieces of information: the necessary contact person in the capital, a man named Darian, and the target's movements, scheduled for a clandestine meeting 3 days before the crowning. What followed was a precise list of access routes and safe houses, all marked on a second, smaller map. But then, near the bottom, written in the master's own meticulous hand, was the target's description: Chief Advisor to the Regent, a known conspirator against the Sunstone Line. His actual name was still a cipher, hidden by a heavy black ink smudge, but the instructions were chillingly clear. The master made it explicit. Failure to complete the elimination would not only lead to her death, but also to the deaths of every single child recruit at the Iron Keep, a brutal threat to enforce her blood oath. A wave of nausea, cold and sharp, hit her. Because of that threat, the contract wasn't just about her life anymore. It was a brutal, forced kinship with the very people who had tortured her. Love is a weakness, but shared survival is a chain. As the silence roared in her ears, Aliena burned the parchment, watching the flames consume the elegant script and the terrifying threat alike. The glow briefly illuminated her face, momentarily peeling back the shadows. Her voice trembled as she murmured, "Survival first." Always. She was forced into the role of the 50 silver on her childhood doorstep. Next, she gathered her travel gear. Her cloak, thick and black as spilled ink, was pulled tight. She checked her lockpicks, a unique set made of dark steel, each one shaped for a specific purpose. She was ready to leave the Iron Keep shadow. Chapter 5: The Unspoken Oath. The courtyard was frozen in the pre-dawn cold. Still, the training continued. The small, 9-year-old child scout she called Whisper, a new recruit barely larger than a shadow, was struggling to hold a fighting stance, muscles shaking from exhaustion. His face was a mask of pain, and a grim-faced instructor stood over him, holding a whip. Aliena's goal: reaffirm her commitment to the blood oath, prioritize survival and duty by enforcing her internal flaw. State: internal conflict quickly suppressed by a hardened exterior. Whisper's small, scraped hand slipped, and the instructor raised the whip. In that moment, the child's eyes darted toward Aliena, a desperate, silent plea for mercy, for recognition. The look was like a blade turning in an old wound. Aliena saw herself 10 years ago, small, terrified, and utterly alone, betrayed by King Regent Alaric. Don't look. Don't feel. They will use it against you. She felt it, clear as day, a terrifying surge of protective instinct, the echo of the Princess Lyra who wanted to stop the torture. But then, the 50 silver reminded her, love/kinship is a weakness. She remembered the master's explicit threat from the scroll. If she showed mercy, if she intervened, she risked the entire unit, including Whisper, by inviting the master's retribution. She risked the failure of her mission. Rather than stopping, Aliena walked past. Her steps were measured, her back straight, her focus absolute. She didn't slow, didn't flinch, didn't speak. She was discipline given form. The instructor's whip came down. A sharp, ugly sound. As the silence broke, Aliena felt the child's pain as if it were her own, but she channeled it, pushed it, into the fierce resolve required for the contract. This is why I must survive. This is the oath. She had to kill the man who had created this prison. She had to prioritize her survival because only she could carry out the ultimate justice. With every heartbeat of the child she ignored, she locked her own heart tighter. Soon after, she reached the outer gate, where her horse waited, a gaunt shadow in the gloom. She mounted the cold leather saddle. She was turning her back on the Iron Keep for the first time in years. The betrayal was complete, but so was her commitment to the mission. This is a definitive rejection of her natural compassion, reinforcing the high price of her identity as the 50 silver. Chapter 6: The New Reality. The journey was long, taxing, and monotonous. Days blurred into nights, marked only by the shifting phases of the moon and the rigorous mental drills Aliena imposed upon herself. With his scent in the air, she was only used to the stale, metallic smell of the keep, but now the air was full of pine and cold stone. She was a moving shadow, relying solely on her assassin training to evade detection across the desolate borderlands. Despite that, the mental exercises were what truly exhausted her. She mentally ran through the palace layouts she hadn't seen since she was 9, forcing herself to recall the location of every secret panel, every servant staircase, every hidden garden gate. She tested her fragmented memory against the small map from the master, finding old, familiar routes marked newly by their unit. The master knew her knowledge was the key. She remembered a game she used to play with her father, the Shadow Queen. She would try to move unseen through the palace for an hour. As if pulled by a string, the memory brought a sharp, unexpected pang of grief, which she immediately smothered. She was no queen. She was a shadow. More importantly, she used the time to study the political situation, piecing together rumors she had collected over the years. Regent Alaric was closing his grip because the coronation was just weeks away. His power was absolute, a terrifying, impenetrable fortress. Even so, her core strength, the adaptive royal intelligence forged by a life of betrayal, began to surface. She realized the mission required not just a knife, but a scalpel. She needed to attack his legitimacy, not just his body. She was thrust into the new situation, but her mind, the princess's mind, was finally being leveraged. By the time she reached the high mountain pass, the air was thin and sharp. She dismounted, leading her horse up the final, winding path. She reached the crest just as the morning sun broke the horizon. Below her, nestled in the valley, was Etheria. The capital, built of pure white marble and gold, sparkled like a jewel. The sunlight caught the towers, reflecting a blinding, cruel light. It was stunning, magnificent, and utterly foreign. Her world tilted. This is not my home, she thought. This is the target. The contrast between the beautiful, innocent memory and the dark, lethal reality of her mission was complete. She took one last, long breath of the cold mountain air. And just like that, everything changed. The assassin had arrived at the kingdom of the lost princess. Her cloak whipped around her in the sudden breeze, and she urged the horse down the slope, beginning the long descent into the dazzling, dangerous light. The new reality awaited. Chapter 7. The City of Gilded Lies. The noise hit Aliana first. After years of the Iron Keep's chilling silence, the sound of the capital was a cacophony. The rhythmic ringing of anvils, the shouts of vendors, the shrill laughter of children. With every step he took down the road, the air grew warmer, heavier, and sickeningly sweet with the scent of spiced wine and celebratory jasmine. The entire city felt like it was holding its breath in anticipation of the upcoming coronation. She entered the main gates disguised in a heavy, charcoal-gray cowl and rough traveler's clothes. The deception was easy. People looked at the wealthy, the brightly dressed, the powerful. They didn't look at shadows. As if the world narrowed to just her and the mission, she forced her gaze straight ahead, yet her peripheral vision drank in every detail. She catalogued the increased presence of the King Regent's elite guard. Too many, too tense. Etheria was dressed for a party, but its eyes were nervous. Not only that, but the sheer vibrancy was disorienting. The white marble buildings, reflecting the sun like polished bone, triggered flashes of childhood memory, a dizzying rush of familiarity. Lyra used to chase pigeons in that plaza. Her heart skipped a beat as she quickly dismissed the thought. The 50 silver has no plazas. The 50 silver has only targets. She had to remind herself, because these memories were toxins, meant to paralyze the weapon. Instead of moving through the main thoroughfare, Aliana used the back alleys and service routes, the dark arteries of the city, navigating by instinct and old, forgotten knowledge. This was her initial exploration, and she realized her mask was metaphorical now. She wore silence and anonymity like armor. She found her designated contact point, a dark, low-ceiling tavern called the Leaking Mug, tucked behind a bustling market. It was precisely the kind of place a royal guard would ignore. She slipped into a corner booth, ordering only water, and began her watch. The contrast between the beauty outside and the darkness she inhabited began the slow crack in her emotional armor. Chapter 8. The Shattering Crest. Aliana didn't have to wait long. Moments later, a figure slid into the bench opposite her. He was young, jumpy, dressed in the slightly ill-fitting clothes of a clerk. This was Darian, the unit's local liaison. He looked more terrified of her than of the palace guard. Darian fidgeted with his cheap cup, avoiding her masked face. His breath was shallow. She didn't know what scared her more, his obvious fear, or the fact that she found his lack of control disgusting. The delivery, Aliana rasped, her voice intentionally toneless.
Yes.
Yes, the 50 silver. Darian's voice was a low, hurried whisper. It's all here. The final brief. And this. He shoved a sealed scroll and a small, antique object across the table. It was a metal crest, about the size of her thumb. It wasn't the royal sunstone symbol, but a lesser, noble house crest, detailed with a faded sun and 3 interlocking rings. What is this? Aliana asked. It was included with the final payment, Darian stammered. A symbol. Proof of the target's betrayal, they said. It was taken from the royal vault 10 years ago. Aliana picked up the crest. The moment her gloved fingers touched the cold metal, a shock ran up her arm. Her bones remembered him. This was the crest of House Alaric, her uncle's house, before he was granted the regent title. The 3 rings symbolized the 3 great betrayals: the theft of the kingdom, the murder of her parents, and her sale. First minor obstacle. Darian's nervousness is a security risk. As the truth unraveled, Aliana broke the wax seal on the scroll, her hands rock steady despite the internal chaos. She scanned the script, focusing on the cipher at the end. Target name, King Regent Alaric. The words were simple. The impact was nuclear. In the span of a breath, the mission transformed. It wasn't just a political hit. It was him. The man who sold her. The job is confirmed, Aliana stated, pushing the scroll back to him. Because of that new, personal rage, her voice was dangerously low. The target is Alaric. You confirm routes and ensure no interference. Confirmed. But, Silver, I heard rumors. Darian swallowed hard, leaning in conspiratorially. Alaric's guards are enforcing a new curfew. They're hunting deserters from the northern front. You need to be careful. They are everywhere. Resolution and transition hook. The mission is now a deeply personal revenge plot, immediately followed by the threat of confrontation. Chapter 9. The Blood on the Marble. Aliana left the tavern, the rage burning behind the porcelain of her mask, turning her shock into deadly focus. Alaric. It was always him. Her world tilted from cold strategy into hot, personal vengeance. The assassin was hunting the man who had created her. She was moving toward the dark back streets when she heard the heavy, rhythmic tread of boots. Curfew, a gruff voice barked. Clear the streets. A city watch patrol, 4 heavy-set guards in Alaric's blue and silver livery, rounded the corner, shining a crude lantern directly onto her. The space between them burned. She was caught in the open, just streets away from her target. You. The lead guard snapped, his face greasy with sweat. Mask 1. What are you doing in this sector after dark? New orders move along. Without warning, Aliana moved. She didn't draw a weapon. That would be too loud. Her body moved on instinct, a blur of practiced violence honed by years of torture. She felt it, clear as day, the cold, satisfying rush of the 50 silver taking over. The first guard lunged. Aliana slipped under his swinging mace, delivering a precise, short-range strike to the solar plexus. He wheezed, collapsing. As if pulled by a string, the second guard raised his crossbow. Aliana used the body of the first as cover, rolling and coming up immediately behind the second. She used the crossbow bolt itself to silently sever the artery in his neck.
Clean.
Quiet. That night, the battle was brief, but brutal. She used the environment, the rough wall, the wet cobblestones, the weight of their own armor, against them. The confrontation was a test. Could she operate as the 50 silver in the heart of her former home? The answer was a grim, resounding yes. She confirmed her effectiveness even when emotionally compromised. The final guard, seeing his comrades down, tried to run, screaming for help. A beat later, Aliana tackled him. She pressed her knee onto his back, reaching for the small, obsidian garrote hidden in her sleeve. She didn't want to kill him, but he was screaming. Silence is survival. The blood oath demanded it. But then, as her fingers tightened, she hesitated. He wasn't Alaric. He was just a guard, a poor soul earning a shilling. She didn't kill him. Instead, she slammed his head against the stone with precise force, knocking him unconscious, but leaving him alive. A small, ugly pool of blood spread on the marble, the first blood drawn in her city, but it wasn't the blood she was sent for. She pulled her hood tighter, vanishing into the shadows of the alleyways. As the wind shifted, carrying the scent of salt and fear, the 50 silver became a phantom threat in her own kingdom. The personal nature of her war had begun. Chapter 10. The Regent's Web. The air in the service tunnels was thick and cold, smelling of stale grease and disinfectant, the hidden stench of a kingdom trying to keep up appearances. She didn't know what scared her more, the suffocating proximity to her target, King Regent Alaric, or the strange exhilaration of navigating the palace's dark veins, paths only Lyra knew. Despite that successful skirmish with the guards, Aliana knew she couldn't rely on brute force. Alaric's control was a sprawling, complicated web, and she needed to find the sticky center. She moved through the tunnels with silent efficiency, an echo of her 10 years of training. She paused beneath a cleverly designed ventilation grate leading directly to the regent's private dining chamber. She heard voices filtering down. Alaric was holding court. Meanwhile, Aliana used a miniature auditory lens to amplify the sound. Alaric's voice, smooth as polished stone and terrifyingly familiar, washed over her. The coronation date is firm. Any dissenters, any whispers of the old line, must be silenced before the sunstone crown touches my brow. He wasn't just plotting a political coup, he was consolidating a tyranny. In that moment, Aliana felt the crushing reality of her past. Her uncle hadn't just betrayed her, he had betrayed the entire kingdom. The moral ideals of the lost princess clashed violently with the assassin's singular focus. As if summoned, a younger, sycophantic voice, Lord Valen, a known loyalist of Alaric, replied, "The people are distracted by the parades, Regent. They swallow the narrative that Princess Lyra is merely lost. They believe you are the stabilizing force."
Lost.
She bit back a low, guttural sound. They had reduced her to a missing trinket. Because of that casual dismissal of her very existence, Aliana's anger flared, confirming her need for revenge. She gathered crucial details. Alaric would be hosting a restricted meeting tomorrow night in the old royal library, discussing the Sunstone Charter, a document she knew was key to legitimacy. Next, she moved deeper into the labyrinthine tunnels, searching for a forgotten storage room mentioned on the master's smaller map. It was locked with an antiquated mechanism, but her lockpicks, each one a precise tool of her trade, made short work of it. She slipped inside. Chapter 11. The Carving and the Courtier. The room was heavy with the smell of mold and forgotten lavender sachets. This wasn't just storage. This was the abandoned wing where the royal children once played. Her chest ached with a grief she refused to name. Aliana quickly ascended a short, hidden staircase that led to a small, dusty landing, once the nursery's observation platform. She leaned against a wooden pillar. As the air thickened, she traced a finger over the grimy surface. And then she saw it. Faded, almost invisible, but undeniable. A tiny, uneven carving of the sunstone sigil, and underneath it, crudely scrawled in a child's hand, the name, Lyra. A small, 8-year-old Lyra had done this, right here. It was the physical evidence of the life she had been forced to kill. The midpoint shift hit her like a lightning bolt. This wasn't just a place of betrayal, it was hers. Before she could move, The heavy outer door creaked open, admitting a sliver of hallway light and a figure, an elderly, gray-haired man in the faded but fine robes of a senior courtier. He carried a single, flickering lamp, his face etched with worry. He wasn't looking for her. He was mourning. The courtier gasped, his lamp rattling. His eyes, though weak, focused not on her masked face, but on the tiny, distinctive scar on her inner wrist, a mark she'd gotten as a child, hidden just beneath her gauntlet in a momentary lapse of coverage. The princess's mark, the courtier whispered, his voice trembling. He didn't say Lyra, but he didn't need to. He knew. The moment their eyes locked, his were filled with disbelief, then tears. Sunstone. He choked out, the single, reverent word hanging in the stale air. Game changes, stakes personal. The courtier confirmed her true identity without a name exchange. The mission is no longer just murder. It is reclamation, threatening her contract and the life of this innocent man. Without thinking, Aliena pushed herself into the deepest shadow, vanishing before the old man could say anything more, leaving him alone with his shock and his desperate, terrible hope. Chapter 12. Justice Over Oath. Aliena didn't return to the storage room. The encounter had irrevocably changed everything. Her thoughts spun, focusing on the implications. The loyalist courtier knew. His life was now in danger, and she had deviated from her blood oath to protect her own identity. She finally allowed herself to examine the hidden scroll she had risked her life for in the service tunnels, off-screen action during the end of Act 3/start of Act 4. It wasn't the Sunstone Charter, but a coded list of Alaric's next targets. Her adaptive royal intelligence cracked the cipher, revealing Alaric's plan to assassinate the loyal Duke Varric, a powerful neutral noble, before the coronation, solidifying his political dominance. Assassination is quick, she muttered to the empty room. Exposure is absolute. In the quiet that followed, she realized the truth. Simply killing Alaric would fulfill the blood oath but solve nothing. The Iron Keep would be paid, but a tyrant's puppet would likely take his place, leaving the kingdom in ruin. Lyra, the queen, had to save the duke. The 50 silver, the weapon, had to disobey the contract. This is the crucial internal struggle of the story, because her survival depended on ruthlessness, but the survival of her kingdom depended on justice. As if fate demanded it, she took a piece of charcoal and sketched a coded warning, details about the threat to Duke Varric, on a scrap of parchment. She sealed it with a specific, nearly invisible fold, a signal only the unit's network would recognize. From there, she knew exactly who to use. She slipped out into the city streets, finding a spot near the leaking mug. She felt it, clear as day, a definitive rejection of her training. She waited for Darian and handed him the message. Deliver this to Duke Varric's private chambers. Use the North Gate route. It is a warning, not a threat. Silver, this isn't part of the assignment, Darian began, his eyes wide. It is now. Aliena cut him off, her voice firm. This mission shifted. Telma 1. Disappear. As the echo faded, Darian hurried away, looking pale. Aliena knew her action had officially deviated from her contract, committing her to a path of justice over the blood oath. The stakes were now infinite. If she failed to expose Alaric, her own mercenary unit would execute her, and the kingdom would fall to tyranny. The game had changed. The mission was no longer about revenge. It was about reclamation. Chapter 13. The Mask of Justice. Aliena was a ghost at the feast. She had used the service tunnels to infiltrate the restricted ballroom where Duke Varric was holding a small, impromptu reception. The Duke, forewarned by Aliena's coded message, had changed his schedule, effectively baiting Alaric's assassins. Her body moved on instinct, slipping through the shadows cast by the dazzling chandeliers. The air smelled of expensive perfume and the coppery tang of anticipation. Aliena was hunting two of the Regent's most trusted shadow agents, operatives she recognized from Iron Keep reports, positioned near the balcony. As the wind shifted slightly from the open French doors, she caught their scent, metallic, cold, and utterly professional. They were preparing to strike. Instead of moving for a kill, Eliana executed a plan that was as risky as it was necessary. She intercepted them in a secluded, curtained alcove just moments before their signal. The tension broke into immediate, silent violence. She used non-lethal force, striking pressure points and joints with brutal, focused precision. She disabled both agents, crushing neither bone nor hope, but rendering them useless, and vanished their weapons. That's why she was here, to save the Duke. She didn't want bodies. She wanted chaos. But then, Alaric himself appeared on the balcony, flanked by 2 more guards, his face a mask of smooth-toned surprise. He hadn't expected to find his agents gone, replaced by nothing. He looked directly at the alcove, his single cold eye narrowing. Eliana was completely hidden, because she was the 50 silver, but she felt his predatory intensity. As the bond pulsed between her hidden identity and her former life, Eliana knew she had exposed her skill level. Alaric understood immediately. A highly skilled operative was working against him. As if the world narrowed, she made a choice. She quietly placed one of the disabled agent's poison daggers on the floor, making it look like the 2 men had turned on each other due to the mission's failure. Moments later, the Duke, alerted by the subtle disturbance, looked into the alcove. He saw the 2 incapacitated men and the weapon. He didn't see Eliana, but he saw the evidence of a high-level plot foiled by an unseen protector. Committing to a path, she had publicly chosen justice over the ruthless demands of her contract, revealing herself as a major disruptor to Alaric. Chapter 14. The Price of Disruption. The foiled plot sent a tremor through the palace. As a result, Alaric's reaction was immediate and terrifyingly efficient. The next day, the entire capital was under a virtual lockdown. Eliana had retreated to a hidden archive room in the palace library. Navigating the confusing shelves with ease, Lyra knew this place like the back of her hand. She felt it clear as day, the cold weight of her actions. She had saved Varric, but she had accelerated the conflict. She watched from a slit window as Alaric himself addressed the city watch in the main courtyard. His voice, amplified by magic, was soothing but firm. There is a professional threat, a phantom, working against the stability of the Sunstone Kingdom. A highly skilled assassin known only by the price of their contract, the 50 silver. Not only that, but Alaric instituted a draconian, citywide curfew, using the fear of the phantom assassin to consolidate his power. The air thickened as Eliana heard him announce a colossal bounty for the culprit. 50 pieces of silver for information leading to the capture of the 50 silver. Eliana stared out the window. The reward was the exact, numerical equivalent of her legendary nickname. He wasn't just offering a bounty, he was publicly reducing her identity, the 50 silver, to a piece of coinage. Consequences of commitment, the antagonist's efforts were now direct, personal, and aimed at leveraging her reputation against her. Which meant that every thief, beggar, and guard in Etheria was now hunting her. She felt it, clear as day, a terrifying new pressure that tested her isolated resolve. The mask of the 50 silver was now a target, not just a shield. Chapter 15. The Unbroken Link. Eliana moved with frantic urgency. The dragnet Alaric had deployed was efficient, and she discovered quickly that Darian, the nervous courier, had been scooped up by Alaric's guards as a suspect during the lockdown. To make things worse, Darian was her only reliable link to the outside, and Alaric would surely break him. She infiltrated the City Watch headquarters, a feat of stealth requiring all her focus. She found Darian chained in a small, grimy holding cell. He looked broken, his eyes wide with terror, his lower lip split. Silver, Darian choked out, fearing overwhelming relief. They asked about the note, the Duke. I didn't say anything, I swear. Silence, Eliana commanded, already working on the thick iron shackles with a specialized pick. She felt it, clear as day, the powerful, conflicting urge. The iron keep taught her to abandon the compromise. Love/kinship is a weakness. But Lyra, the queen, knew you needed allies. This was the definitive rejection of her internal flaw. She wasn't saving him for the mission, she was saving him because he had shown courage and loyalty. As the mark tingled on her wrist, a familiar, deep thrum of pain and memory, She handed him a small, dark steel dagger, one of her secondary tools, before breaking the final lock. "They will be back," Darian, Eliana murmured. "You run. You hide. And you wait for my signal." Before either could speak, the sound of heavy boots echoed down the corridor. Alaric's elite guards were returning. "Go. Use the dagger if you must. Survive." She didn't know what scared her more, the guards finding her, or the fact that she was leaving a part of herself, her commitment to humanity, with Darian. She had actively chosen to protect a weak ally, a choice that put her squarely on the path of the princess and solidified her transformation away from the assassin. No turning back now, she had broken the oath. Eliana vanished into the dark ventilation shafts above the cell just as the guards burst in, leaving Darian staring at the open shackles and the offered dagger, a tiny beacon of hope in the darkness. Chapter 16. The Silent Betrayal. The air in the sewage tunnels was thick with the stench of decay and failure. Eliana was hiding, using the city's underbelly as her sanctuary, but her vigilance was broken by a terrifying scent, the distinctive, metallic ash odor of Iron Keep operatives. As the wind shifted, carrying the unmistakable smell of her former life, panic, a raw, untamed emotion she hadn't felt in years, clawed at her throat. A beat later, a small, tightly folded piece of black parchment, tied with the Iron Keep's thin silver wire, drifted down from a higher grate. Eliana caught it midair. It was a message, delivered with impossible precision, meaning the messenger was close, skilled, and silent. She unfolded the note. The script was minimal, clean, and devastatingly clear. Contract void. Retribution authorized. The weapon failed the oath. The price must be paid. The master. The master's blow hit her with the force of a physical punch. She wasn't just working outside the contract anymore, she was being hunted on her own. Because of that voided contract, her knowledge of the Keep's tracking methods, her greatest defense, was now her greatest vulnerability. She was caught between the political tyranny of Alaric above and the ruthless assassin's code of the Keep below. Which meant she had failed Lyra, she hadn't gained justice yet. And she had failed the 50 silver, she had let her emotions crack her resolve. She didn't know what scared her more, the physical threat of the Keep's punishment detail, or the cold, hard validation of her internal flaw, love/kinship is a weakness. Her kindness to Darian and her efforts for Duke Varric had only invited destruction. Without warning, she heard the soft scrape of steel above. They were tracking her, not by sight, but by a deeper, more brutal method of surveillance she knew well. Just like that, she was forced to abandon her temporary safe house and all her gathered intel. She sank deeper into the cold, stinking current, fleeing into the city's poorest district. She was hunted by the antagonist and her own former allies. Chapter 17. The Streets of Despair. Eliana scrambled out of the sewers and into the slums that hugged the eastern wall of the city. Still, the air was heavy with despair, only now it was human suffering, not just sewage. The lockdown imposed by Alaric, ostensibly to find the 50 silver, had strangled the food supply, creating pockets of starvation and cruelty. She witnessed a horrifying scene, a small family, a mother and 2 children, being brutally interrogated by a passing patrol for a stolen loaf of stale bread. A growl rose in her throat, a sound of raw, impotent fury. Before she could move, she saw the soldiers kick the mother, forcing the children to watch. The brutality was casual, absolute. Eliana's old training, the detached, invisible methods of the 50 silver, offered no solution here. She couldn't fight a whole army. Her isolated, quiet actions were a drop in a vast ocean of tyranny. Instead of saving them with violence, she risked a move of pure desperation. She created a diversion, a quick, loud noise in a nearby empty warehouse, drawing the patrol's attention away for a precious few seconds. As the silence broke, she slipped a handful of her remaining silver coins, not the 50 silver, but common currency, into the mother's hand before melting back into the shadows. Loss of hope struck her immediately. The mother looked up, not in gratitude, but in terror, terrified of the mysterious masked figure. Because of that reaction, Aliana realized the truth. She was seen as another threat, another phantom of violence. Her justice meant nothing here. Her old methods were insufficient to save the city. The weight of the kingdom's suffering was now crushing her spirit. She felt it clear as day, the immense, terrible failure of her mission. She was forced to flee, leaving the scene of failure behind, covered in the dirt of the streets she was born to rule. Chapter 18. The Crucible of Lyra. Wounded, a deep, painful slice across her thigh from an iron keep-tracking arrow she'd barely dodged, Aliana dragged herself into the ruin of an old temple, a stone shell forgotten by the city. Her pulse raced, hammering against her ribs. She was alone, bleeding, and hunted by everyone. The all-is-lost moment arrived not with a bang, but with a defeated whimper. She was defeated. She carefully pulled off the ceramic mask, the 50 silver, dropping it onto the grimy altar stone. It was silent, lifeless, and empty. It never solved anything, she thought, it only ended things. She stared at her reflection in a puddle of water, a bruised, blood-streaked face she barely recognized. She felt it, clear as day, her deepest fear. She was nothing but the weapon Alaric had created and the keep had perfected. Her attempts at connection, Darien, Varric, had led to more pain. Her internal flaw seemed validated, kinship and connection led to failure. As her thoughts spun into utter despair, she reached into her sleeve and pulled out the small, smooth, Lyra pebble. She held it, tracing the faint gold flecks, the memory of her parents a ghost on her skin. She had two choices now, die as the 50 silver or die as Lyra. Both ended in blood. Crucible moment. With every heartbeat, she realized the queen she was meant to be couldn't win this war with the assassin's tools. She was broken down to her raw self. But then, as she reached for the pebble one last time, her fingers brushed against something taped to the underside of the ruined altar, a small, stiff piece of paper, folded precisely. It was too clean to be old. It had been left recently. She carefully peeled it off. It was a message, written in the shaky but elegant script of the elderly loyalist courtier from Act 4. It wasn't a message of rescue, but a critical clue, a mention of an obscure old royal tradition involving a hidden document and the exact timing of the coronation ceremony. Aliana's despair paused, replaced by a single, fragile spark of adaptive royal intelligence. As the echo faded, she realized the courtier, risking his life, had given her the true weapon, knowledge. Not a knife. A final chance. The climb back begins now. Chapter 19. The Strategist's Weapon. Aliana stared at the courtier's note. It wasn't a map or an escape route. It was a riddle about a location and a document, the ancient, long-forgotten oath of Sunstone Kings. The document had to be signed on the day of coronation, at the moment the Sunstone crown was placed, or the ceremony was invalid. Alaric, in his haste to seize power, had likely hidden the original document, intending to sign a fraudulent copy. The revelation hit her with blinding force. The clue sparked her adaptive royal intelligence, pulling her mind away from the despair of the slums. The assassin can kill one man, the queen can reclaim a kingdom. Because of that new, expansive perspective, she realized the only way to win was not to kill Alaric, but to expose his treason at the highest, most public moment. The Sunstone's shadow must fall at dawn, she whispered, piecing together the old, ceremonial language. The riddle led to a hidden vault beneath the old royal crypt, a place where the original, genuine oath would be stored. If she could retrieve it, she could prove his intent to sign a forgery. Instead of reaching for her knife, Aliana meticulously cleaned the blood and dirt from her hands. She was rejecting the assassin's way for the strategist's way, finally understanding that her royal intelligence was her true weapon. As the bond pulsed with the memory of her parents, she knew the path of reclamation was the only path left. Without another word, Aliana left the ruin. She needed to reach Darien, the courier she had saved. She had to shed the identity of the 50 silver to gain his trust. Chapter 20. The Unmasked Queen. Aliana found Darien hiding in a dilapidated loft, his face gaunt with fear, but alive. With every step he took, She felt the immense risk of this encounter. She was about to expose her greatest secret to the weakest link in her network. Darian immediately reacted to her presence, reaching for the small dagger she had given him. Silver, you're alive. The Master's men are everywhere. I am not the 50 Silver anymore, she cut him off, her voice low and steady. The space between them burned with the force of her revelation. But then, she did the unprecedented. She reached up and unclipped the ceramic mask, letting it fall silently to the rough wooden floor. The face revealed was bruised, tired, but marked by the regal bone structure of the Sunstone line. Darian stared, his jaw slack. As her world tilted, he saw not the phantom assassin, but a ghost from the history books. The 50 Silver was forged by the man who sits on the throne, she told him, her eyes locking onto his. Her voice trembled only slightly, not with fear, but with the weight of the truth. My name is Aliana Lyra Sunstone. I am the Lost Queen. She felt it clear as day, the immense, terrifying vulnerability of the reveal. Because of that vulnerability, Darian's fear was replaced by awe and conviction. The Regent Alaric sold me into slavery and ordered my family murdered, she continued, her voice gaining strength. I have broken my contract and I am hunted by my former masters. I am fighting to reclaim my throne and save this kingdom. I need your eyes, Darian. Are you with Lyra, the queen, or do you leave me to die as the weapon? As the echo faded, Darian, tears streaming down his face, dropped the dagger and sank to one knee. For the Sunstone Kingdom, your grace, he whispered, his loyalty absolute. The assembly was complete. She had shed the 50 Silver isolation and secured her first genuine ally. Not only that, but Darian provided the next crucial piece, the exact minute Alaric would be ushered into the royal crypt to retrieve the forgery before the ceremony. Chapter 21, The Approach of Dawn. Aliana, now fueled by purpose, was no longer just running, she was attacking. She used Darian to gather the few scattered loyalists, the courtier, a few trusted household guards, for a final briefing. Her plan was audacious: infiltrate the coronation using a forgotten passage and expose Alaric before the entire court. She put back on the mask and the armor of the 50 Silver for the final time. But then, the mask felt different. It was no longer a cage, it was a tool for Lyra's justice. The approach required her to use the deepest secrets of her childhood, a hidden, forgotten royal passage, rumored to lead directly into the royal crypt. She squeezed through the narrow, ivy-choked entrance behind the old queen's memorial statue, a place she used to call the Dragon's Throat. With every heartbeat, the palace clock chimed the 3rd hour before dawn. She felt it clear as day, the race against time. The passage was dark, choked with earth, and smelled strongly of iron and damp stone. She pushed through, her wounded leg screaming in protest, because the fate of the kingdom rested on her speed. Meanwhile, she reviewed her strategy. Darian and the courtier would secure the exits and be ready with the evidence once she made the signal. The risk was monumental. If she failed, the keep would kill her and Alaric would execute Darian. By the time Aliana reached the end of the passage, her body was shaking from the strain. She heard the faint, solemn music of the coronation procession beginning in the grand hall above. The chiming bells seemed to mock her effort. As the sky darkened outside the palace, Aliana found the final door. It was heavy, ornate, and led directly to the upper gallery overlooking the grand coronation hall. Without thinking, she shoved the door open with a surge of adrenaline, bursting through the final passage. She was masked, armed, and perfectly positioned, overlooking the entire assembled court, just as King Regent Alaric began his slow, triumphant walk toward the throne. The final confrontation was seconds away. Chapter 22, The Sunstone's Truth. The sight of King Regent Alaric, standing smugly before the jeweled Sunstone throne, was a physical blow that settled Aliana's rage. He was seconds from crowning himself. As the bond pulsed between her silent resolve and the memory of her parents, Aliana dropped from the gallery, landing with a sharp, controlled thud that silenced the entire hall. The space between them burned. Alaric, momentarily stunned, recovered with chilling speed. The 50 silver. You're late to the party, he sneered, gesturing to his elite guards. A mere thief, interrupting a coronation. Take her and collect your silver. The confrontation was swift and symbolic. When the guards lunged, Eliana did not use a knife. Instead, she used her bare hands, leveraging their own heavy armor against them. She struck pressure points, disabling them and dropping them in 3 precise, non-lethal moves. She was demonstrating the assassin's power, but controlling its outcome. She stood before Alaric, the high priest frozen with the crown midair. She held a dagger, her primary weapon, to Alaric's throat. She felt it clear as day, the power to fulfill the blood oath, to take her vengeance. But then, Lyra asserted herself. As the echo faded of the crowd's gasps, Eliana performed the ultimate, final act of her transformation. With a deliberate, steady hand, she reached up and removed the cold ceramic mask. She let it fall to the marble floor, where it cracked with a small, pathetic sound. I am not the 50 silver, she declared, her voice ringing with the forgotten authority of the Sunstone line. I am Eliana Lyra Sunstone. And you, Regent, are a traitor. Alaric's composure finally shattered. He gasped, his eyes wild with disbelief. Impossible. You were a ghost. Eliana didn't answer with violence. She answered with the truth. She then presented the final, irrefutable evidence, the oath of Sunstone Kings she had retrieved from the crypt. The true oath lies here. Your scroll, High Priest, is a forgery, signed by a usurper. The tension broke. Darian and the courtier, waiting outside, rushed in, presenting the collected evidence of Alaric's tyranny. The court, seeing the scar on her wrist, the princess's mark, and hearing the truth, turned against the regent. Conflict resolved, loyal guards, led by Duke Varric, moved swiftly. Alaric was arrested, railing against the assassin. Eliana chose justice and reclamation over personal revenge and the duty to her torturers. Transformation is complete. Chapter 23. The Unraveling of the Iron Keep. Alaric was gone. The chaos of the hall was now the quiet, efficient work of stabilization. In the stillness that followed, Eliana delegated authority, showing she trusted her allies. She tasked the courtier with securing the royal crypt and Darian with mobilizing the city watch, assigning them based on their true strengths, not their titles. As the bond pulsed, she felt a familiar shift in the air, a metallic scent too similar to blood. The master's punishment detail had arrived. 2 assassins, black-clad shadows, detached from the courtyard shadows, their bows drawn and aimed at the unmasked queen. Without thinking, Eliana walked toward them. She ordered her royal guards to lower their weapons, trusting her knowledge of the assassin's code. Your contract is void, Eliana stated, her voice calm and absolute. She felt it clear as day, a surge of her royal courage. Your mission is finished, and the Iron Keep has been exposed. My life is the price now. Kill me, and you fail the oath. Allow me to live, and you live to serve a different purpose. The assassins hesitated. They were programmed to kill the failed weapon, but she had become the powerful center of a new kingdom, a force they could not breach without certain death. Because of that new, absolute power she commanded, they disarmed, dropping their bows with a muffled thud onto the stone. Eliana simply nodded, sending a message of dominance without murder. The Iron Keep's threat was neutralized without Eliana sacrificing her new moral center. Moments later, Eliana finally allowed herself to be led away to her old royal chambers. She was utterly drained. She looked at the mask lying on the floor of the hall, a cracked, ceramic relic. She left it there. As the wind shifted and carried the sounds of the relieved city, Eliana, the queen, finally rested. Chapter 24. The New Queen. A few weeks later, the Sunstone Kingdom was quiet. Eliana, dressed simply in a gown the pale gold of the rising sun, held a small, private audience. She felt it clear as day, the immense, terrifying, and wonderful weight of her duty. She stood before Darian, the courier, and the elderly courtier. The space between them burned with gratitude and shared sacrifice. She pardoned Darien for his minor offenses, appointing him her chief courier and intelligence liaison. She appointed the courtier to her new advisory council. As her soul answered the call of justice, she was establishing a new normal built on loyalty, not fear. Thematic resonance. Aliana found strength in connection and service, the exact opposite of her initial flawed belief. With every heartbeat, she was rejecting the prison of her past. The Sunstone Kingdom will no longer be ruled by silence, she told them, her voice strong. The weapon is retired. The Queen will rule with open counsel. Epilogue: A Sunstone's Dawn. Aliana stood on the great palace balcony, looking out over the shining city of Etheria. It was dawn, the sun touching the gold towers. She was no longer silent, but thoughtful, allowing herself a rare moment of introspection. She touched the small, hidden scar on her inner wrist, the princess's mark. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the old, tarnished silver coin, the final payment for the 50 silver contract. She rubbed the coin between her fingers, acknowledging the darkness that forged her. Just like that, everything changed. She had been a tool of vengeance, but she had chosen to be a force of justice. She threw the silver coin off the balcony, sending the final remnant of her assassin's life spiraling away. She touched the small Lyra pebble, no longer hiding it, but feeling its warmth. As if fate demanded it, she turned from the shadow of the past toward the dazzling light of her kingdom. She was Queen Lyra, and the true journey of the Sunstone Queen had finally begun.